Let's talk about what critics are saying about Supergirl, because it is getting slaughtered out there. Now, initially when this movie came out, there was a lot of positive press, a lot of social media influencers that were invited to the events. They were glowing about it, saying it's wonderful, it's great. And for a split second, once I saw the reviews, I was wondering, maybe Supergirl is actually pretty good. And then the real reviews started coming in. This is what John Roca had to say about the initial reviews. I see why WB moved their first wave of Supergirl reactions up 6 days. Their carefully cultivated list of critics, pundits, and paid influencers raved about it overall, and that they did. But the first reactions from critics that came out today is very mixed. Its box office is in some trouble here. Speaking of the box office, watching Supergirl track toward a worse global opening weekend than Morbius, despite costing literally 3 times as much to make, is absolute insanity. What went wrong with the DCU? WB might be thinking the same thing in terms of the box office, because it's not exactly like Superman did stellar box office numbers either last year. Grace Randolph started off pretty optimistic. Here we go! Hashtag Supergirl. Then after the movie, how unfortunate. Melting face emoji. You know it's bad when Variety says this. Supergirl is a super horrendous comic book movie with the worst script I can remember, reads Variety's review from Owen Gleiberman. James Gunn said he wasn't going into production on any movie until the script was rock solid, for that was the overriding problem with the superhero overkill era. The films had lousy scripts, which served as grids for layering visual effects. Gunn was right to want to take the comic book genre back to the basics of well-structured screenwriting. So what has he done in his second DC outing? He has given us a comic book movie with the worst script I can remember. Ouch. Variety pulling no punches. Brian Norwood said, Supergirl. This is Diet Guardians of the Galaxy. Aggressively unremarkable. Millie is great. I wish everything else was on her level. That's what I've heard for the most part, is that the actress she's good. She's a good actress. But the material itself, the script, is not up to par. Lex Luthor said this, and I'm assuming that this is parody, but he says, this is the worst movie I've ever seen in my entire life. But then he tweeted this, would you all want to know OP's real thoughts on the movie? And of course people said, yes, we would like to know. And he said, Supergirl 2026 is not good. Alan NG from Film Threat said this, profoundly awful. Like, to say a film is just awful is one thing, but to say profoundly awful, now it's a whole nother level of awful. Scott Menzel said, Supergirl is a massive disappointment. It feels nothing like a Craig Gillespie movie, and instead it comes across as a half-baked Guardians of the Galaxy. Millie Alcock tries her best, but I never fully bought her in the title role. As someone who wasn't particularly high on Gunn's Superman, this actually made me miss Superman. The plot is paper thin, with the movie feeling like a collection of random scenes stitched together rather than a cohesive story. Sure, Krypto is still absolutely adorable, but a cute CGI dog isn't enough to carry an entire film. The strange needle drops don't help either. Just a bizarre and deeply disappointing experience. So Superman's on Amazon Prime, and I started watching it for the second time. And I am kind of just sick of filmmakers exploiting dogs. The other thing that gets exploited too is the whole baby thing. You had Baby Yoda, Baby Groot. In some ways it feels like a little bit of a shortcut to try to get to the audience's heart. We'll use this cute dog and we'll make you hate the villain because the villain's gonna do something bad to this dog. I mean, it's fine if you do it once, but I hear they do something like that again here in Supergirl. Gerald says the fact that Supergirl is struggling in the box office tracking despite that heavily advertised Superman cameo is proof that the audiences are tired of the Gunn formula. He's trying to force his quirky Guardian style onto the DCU, but global audiences already rejected his Suicide Squad and Superman. DC needs someone who respects the gravity of these characters, not another comedy routine. When I watched Superman last night and you compare it to Man of Steel, I think most people, even the people that do not like Man of Steel, would have to say that Man of Steel will stick around longer in the zeitgeist than James Gunn's Superman. I do think partly because he did treat Superman with some gravitas, whereas James Gunn, you don't necessarily get the sense that he has a deep reverence for any of these characters. High Top Alex says, sad to say that it feels like it was edited down to the bone, leaving characters to speak their trauma and pain without ever dedicating enough time to showcasing it. Outside the performances in 2 scenes, what was released felt voiceless. No clear point of view or reason to be. Very weird to take such an interesting character and beautiful story and seemingly nerf it into the confines of a generic superhero movie. Feels like there's a 2.5-hour version just waiting to be theorized about. I wonder what happened. Grace Randolph later went on to say, an epic failure on the level of Birds of Prey and Thor Love and Thunder, and dare I say Snow White. Pretty epic failures, I'd say. I have yet to see Snow White, but I will say Thor Love and Thunder was a massive disappointment. Dan Marcus says Supergirl is a perfectly fine and enjoyable film, but some of these critics are acting like the movie is the worst sin committed to film. It's not. So here is Supergirl on Rotten Tomatoes, and currently it's sitting at 57% with critics. However, it is sitting at 76% with audiences. 57% for this Temu Supergirl movie is still too high. Brutal. Absolutely brutal. Jason Stetner says Supergirl was rough. It was a Guardians of the Galaxy-like knockoff 10 years too late. Millie I felt was good. The story was bland with random skips and the visuals were devoid of vibrancy. Meh villain, cringy moments, and came across as dated. We are hearing a lot of reviews saying that this film does resemble Guardians of the Galaxy. That is something that we are continually hearing over and over again. I've certainly heard other people saying it looks like Mad Max Fury Road. Here's a scathing review from the New York Post. DC is already back to making mediocre superhero movies. And here we can see Jason Momoa, who plays Lobo. Haven't heard much about him in these reviews, although I heard he's pretty good for the short amount of time that he's in there. So Rob has this to say, in somewhat of a defense of Supergirl. Much of the criticism is valid, but it's not near as bad as people are saying. It's just overwhelmingly okay. If this was a Marvel film, it would have a 70 to 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. Hell, Marvel has probably 10 projects post-Endgame worse than this. I suppose I could see that being possible because that bar is not terribly high with the post-Endgame projects from the MCU. We had Eternals, the Marvels, Thor Love and Thunder, Ant-Man Quantumania. Some pretty rough stuff in there. Since we just mentioned Endgame, co-director of that film, Joe Russo, says, F the critics, F the noise, F the misogynistic Snyder bros. If I was James Gunn and this script crossed my desk, I'd make it too. This movie is Supergirl. This is actually his real account, but it does feel like somebody making a parody of his account. But there are people out there that are saying that Millie is the problem with this movie. For instance, Now We Are Cooking Chat, Supergirl, with Sydney Sweeney as Supergirl. Adam Francisco says DC Supergirl could have crushed the box office if they had made one simple decision. And I would say Sydney Sweeney much more resembles Helen Slater from Supergirl 84. And if you haven't seen Supergirl 84, it's pretty bad. It's a terrible movie. However, I would put it in the category of so bad it's good. And I certainly do appreciate her portrayal of Supergirl. I thought she did a great job. Verbal Riot says the cherry on top of the stupid sundae is that James Gunn is actually doubling down on the Superman harem plotline, even after knowing that was one of the biggest complaints of the first movie. Like, watching that last night, it was just really bizarre. I don't think James Gunn should have even done that in the first place, but if he was going to do it, there was certainly a better way of doing it than the way that he did it in that film. I just felt like the execution of it was incredibly awkward. So in a stark contrast to Variety's review, Rolling Stone had this to say. Supergirl will make a case to casual moviegoers that the character deserves to be treated as more than a super family footnote. They said, a satisfying take on a stellar comic book story. Feels like a rather generic review. I think Supergirl for me might be similar to The Flash, where I had my expectations so incredibly low that when I finally saw the movie, yeah, it was mildly entertaining. Matt Walsh had this to say: nobody cares about or watches these female superhero movies. I think there's been maybe one that didn't flop this century. One was Captain Marvel, but we know that people saw that because they were getting hyped for Endgame, and that came out right before then. The other one was Wonder Woman. I believe the box office on that was around 900 million or so. But as far as the rest goes, the record is not that good. Female-led action films in general are almost always a dud. There's no audience for it. Nobody wants to see some 105-pound girl boss action hero. It's a comedically absurd premise, and there's no getting around that. The studios are of course aware of this market reality, yet they keep churning these out anyways because they'll willingly lose money for the sake of pandering to women who want these movies to exist in principle but don't actually care to watch them. That's how female-centric our society has become. I think Wonder Woman is probably the best female-led superhero movie. When you look at Wonder Woman 2, you look at the Marvels, what we're hearing about Supergirl, but you could also look at male-led films that are bad, and they don't do good at the box office either. I just see a simple pattern of like bad movies do bad. So I'm not willing to completely go with Matt and say that audiences do not want female-led superhero movies. I think the problem is that most of them that have been made just aren't particularly good and have not gotten good word of mouth. Here's Joe Vargas from the Angry Joe Show, and I think you could see by his thumbnail here, he didn't really care for it. John Flickinger from the Flick Pick said, "This movie must be pretty mediocre if every thumbnail is someone looking like they're about to crap their pants." It's true. It's true. Scoob said this: James Gunn is going to tweet this out next week. This was Dwayne Johnson after Black Adam release. Waited to confirm with the financiers before I shared this excellent Black Adam news. Our film will profit between 52 million and 72 million. Fact. At almost 400 million worldwide, we are building our new franchise step by step for the DC future. Oh man, Scoop said James Gunn is going to tweet this out next week. Oh my gosh. I do remember James Gunn having some cope about Superman not doing all that great last year, and I suppose I could see him doing this with Supergirl as well. Alright, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Did you see Supergirl? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Is it as bad as some of the reviews on here, or did you like it? I want to thank you for watching the video. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. I'll see you in the next one.